Hi everyone, my name is Beverly De-Gale. I'm co-founder of the ACLT, that's the African Caribbean Leukaemia Trust. I'm here today with Karen, I'm here with Helena, and we are going to be talking about ACLT and bridging the gap. So Karen, Helena, let me tell you a bit about my story. So myself and my now husband, Oren, we started ACLT 27 years ago. It was 3 years after our son, Daniel, had been diagnosed with an acute form of leukemia. He was 6 years of age, and at the time of diagnosis, we was told that if we had waited another week, Daniel would have passed away because the leukemia had spread quite widely through his body, and the blast cells of leukemia was at like 97% of his entire blood. So he was in a really bad situation. We was taken to Great Ormond Street where they immediately started treatment, and we was told it's a childhood form of leukemia, so the hope is that Daniel will have 2 years of treatment, and at the end of it, if he's leukemia free, he should go on and lead a normal life. So Daniel had 2 years of treatment, everything seemed to be going well. At the end, they said, great, Daniel's in remission, just go off and get on with life. In my mind, I thought, okay, so Daniel's young enough now to be able to move on from this and actually get on with the rest of his life. We took a family holiday, took him and his sister to Cyprus, we went to Egypt, we went to the birthplace of Jesus, it was amazing. Got back, went back to school, and 9 months later, the leukemia came back. At this point, we was told that Daniel needed a bone marrow transplant. But we was also told that because of Daniel's ethnicity, it was going to be very difficult to find Daniel's donor. In fact, we was quoted 1 in a $250,000 chance of finding a matching donor because bone marrow matching is race specific. And so myself and Oren started the ACLT in an attempt to find Daniel's donor, but also by this point it had become very clear to us that actually this was much bigger than Daniel. And so the ACLT, which could have been called the Daniel De-Gale Trust, was called the ACLT because we wanted to assist as many families as possible whilst we searched for Daniel's donor. 6 years after Daniel was diagnosed, a born-again Christian in the United States was found to be Daniel's perfect match. She donated stem cells to Daniel on the 16th of June, 1999, which allowed Daniel to, after 6 months of fighting and battling to get through the transplant, he went back to school and tried to lead as normal life as possible. In 2004, we were given the contact details of Daniel's donor. Her name's Doreen Carney, and as I said, she's a born-again Christian from Detroit, Michigan, USA. And myself, Oren, Daniel, and his sister Dominique traveled to Detroit in 2005 to meet Daniel's donor, and Doreen became a family friend for life. And to this day, we still communicate with her. And if you know our story, a few years after that, Daniel went to university. He had problems along the way, but he was generally able to fight them. But he also developed a condition called hemolytic anemia, which is where the red blood cells keep breaking down. And because of this, Daniel was requiring 3 to 5 units of blood every week just to survive. In amongst all of this, Daniel was enjoying life, trying to make the most out of the situation. He was taking holidays, he started to have girlfriends, his friends were all around him, but because of the years of chemotherapy, radiotherapy and other treatments that Daniel had to receive, it all took its toll. And so we lost Daniel on the 8th of October 2008. That was obviously the hardest time in my life, certainly. It still is to this day, but Daniel is the legacy to everything that we do at ACLT. And in fact, I'm telling you now, and I feel quite emotional just talking about him. I find it very difficult So I'm really grateful for what we are able to do today with you both. But through stories like your own, which we're going to talk about, hopefully we can reach new audiences and get more people interested in signing up if they've not done so already, and maybe talking to their loved ones about joining the register to try and help save a life. So enough about me. Karen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Karen, and I think I will start by saying firstly I am an ACLT ambassador, which I'm really proud to be.
What does that mean? Tell us, what is an ACLT ambassador?
An ACLT ambassador is somebody who first and foremost believes and resonates with the mission of ACLT, which is to, bridge the gap, get people to become, blood donors, stem donors, and, wants to be able to do their part in, getting as many people on board. And that's what I'm doing. And so I'm very proud of that. And so as life would have it, I am also somebody that's actually benefited from having a stem cell donor save my life as a result of a blood cancer diagnosis that I had a few years ago. And so this is the first time I'm meeting you, Helena, and it's lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
And you look amazing.
Thank
as well.
you.
I mean, we all look amazing, if I do say so myself.
Yeah. So, Karen, do you mind if I just ask you, what type of blood cancer was you diagnosed with, and how did it present itself when you were first diagnosed?
Okay, yes. So I was diagnosed with MDS, and it presented itself through tiredness, like extreme tiredness, like I could barely function, and also night sweats. That was crazy. I think those are the two things that made me feel like, oh, okay, what's going on here, right? But even then, for a while, I just sort of said to myself, you know what, maybe let me just rest, or maybe let me just sleep with the windows open, right? These are things that you think you can sort of resolve by changing a few things here and there. So
did you get concerned enough to go to your doctors? Did you speak to your parents? What happened?
I'll be so honest with you. The reason why I actually went to the doctors is because I was going to Ghana for December to enjoy myself. If anyone knows about Dirty December,
yeah, I do.
That's what I was going to do.
What's Dirty December?
And so Dirty December is like, you go back home, like to Ghana or to like wherever, and just enjoy yourself for the festive period, right? And I said to myself, okay, so they don't have an NHS over in Ghana, so let me just go to my doctor, just in case, tell them what's been going on, and let me just see if they'll send me for a blood test. And so they sent me for a blood test. I think the results came back, I think by the time I came back from Ghana in early January of 2018, the results came back, and the doctor was like, have you been ill recently? Have you had any infections? And to my knowledge, I said, no. And so she said, well, your blood results look a bit questionable, so let's do it again.
Right.
And we did it again. And again, the results came back, and it still looked questionable to my doctor. And so she said, I'm going to refer you to the hospital. And I was referred to my local hospital. And, they tried to find out a bit of information about your history, your background, etc. And then from there, we started doing more tests, like a bone marrow test, etc. And then it just sort of snowballed.
So was you concerned by this point that something wasn't right?
Do you know what? I only became concerned when I got a letter from the hospital saying that the unit you're going to is the Macmillan unit.
Yes.
So, of course, everyone knows Macmillan and cancer.
Yes.
And I remember saying to my friend, what? Why are they sending me here? If I'm just going to do
So at this point,
test.
Nobody had said the C word to you?
No, nobody had. So I was like, okay. But along I went nonetheless. And I think from then, when I met with the doctor and they said we have to do a bone marrow test, that's when I started thinking, okay, this is different. It's not what I was expecting. But again, I'll go along with it if that's what you advise. And yeah.
You got the diagnosis?
So not even. So they got results back from my bone marrow test. But for them, they couldn't really get a picture as to what was going on. They could see something wasn't right, but they just couldn't pinpoint what it was. And so they referred me to specialist hospital, which was King's in this instance, because it's like a centre of excellence for blood conditions. And then it was when I got into King's and under their care, that's when, you know, further testing and, you know, genetic testing even, more bone marrow tests, more blood tests, more extensive blood tests, etc. That's when, you know, they were able to say, okay, this is what your diagnosis is.
Right.
And yeah.
And if you don't mind me asking, how did that impact you, getting that diagnosis?
Yeah, it came as a big shock.
Had anybody else in your family ever been diagnosed with anything like this?
Never.
Okay, so how did your parents respond?
We were all shocked.
Yeah.
And thinking, how, like, what's going on? I guess you could also say, because they were still also investigating, because I don't have the, I don't fit the profile of someone who should have this sort of diagnosis. Well, at the time anyway, right? That's what I was told. So I think for them, as in like my medical team, there was also that element of trying to understand like what's going here. That's why, for example, you know, they did additional genetic testing, you know, in my instance, to really find out, is it like a genetic issue? Yeah. So, you know, we were all shocked, trying to process it, but as well as also go through the motions of what was required, say like from hospital visits with the hematology department, as well as other departments in the hospital, speaking to say like other organizations, you know. Yeah.
So at what point was you told that you needed a stem cell donor?
So we first started discussing it, I think probably in October of 2018, which wasn't too long after my diagnosis, my official diagnosis.
Okay. So when they spoke to you about it, was family members tested?
Yes, actually. So we tested my siblings.
Right.
They weren't a match.
How many?
Two. I've got two siblings. And
both parents?
yes.
Right.
And then they moved on to my parents.
Right.
And obviously my parents will be a match by virtue of the fact that DNA and genetics, you know. But again, when you're also looking at, say, maybe their age and their own health, etc., it wasn't have been the best.
The best match for you?
Yes, match for me.
Yeah.
Right? And so that moved us on to looking at the database of registered stem cell donors.
And did they tell you how that search was going?
So I know that initially they said they've sort of like identified one person.
Did you know what having a transplant meant?
At that time, no, in all sincerity.
At the point that they told you, right, you need to have a transplant now, how soon after that did this take place?
So fast forward to 2019, I would say about October 2019, that's when we started saying, okay, now seems like the time.
Is that because your condition was progressing?
Yes, it was progressing, but it wasn't symptomatically progressing, should I, just to point out. So that means it wasn't like interrupting my life in any sort of way. It was just that when they did their checkups, like blood tests and bone marrow tests, etc., they could see under the is it microscope that things are changing.
Okay.
So that's why come October 2019, they said they want to push
and
forward
so they
this.
checked the registers again?
Yes.
And found what?
So by this time, they'd found an additional 2 potential matches.
Do you know where they were?
I can't, no. I only know where my eventual donor was based. I can't recall where the other 2 are based.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so your donor, where was your donor from?
He was from America.
America.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you have any other details about him? Age?
So I believe he was also, I believe he was in his 30s.
Okay.
If I remember well. And I remember one interesting fact that they told me about him was that he was allergic to seafood. And what else? Paracetamol, yes.
Right.
And they told me that just in case I picked up his allergy. I'm glad to say I didn't.
You didn't, okay.
I mean, imagine being allergic to paracetamol.
And seafood.
I'll be so honest.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm not a seafood person, so I would have been.
How interesting.
Yeah.
But one thing that you would have picked up from him, and that's his blood group.
Yes. it is his blood group.
So your blood group changed to his blood group.
Yes,
That's quite amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had your transplant in which month?
I had my transplant in March 2021.
And so your donor's stem cells were flown from the US to the UK, brought to your hospital.
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
How was that for you and your family?
That was a moment of relief because it'd been quite a journey up until that point. And so it was good to be able to get to that moment. And even like up until the day before, I remember I was in hospital, right? Oh my gosh, I was feeling so rough. I was so ill. I was so ill. Yeah.
So tell us about how your journey was after the transplant.
So, okay, transplant day comes, as they call it, day 0, right? And me being me, I dressed up because hospital or not being in the hospital, I was going to dress up. So that was great. I was excited, like, yeah, we finally made it to this day. And we did the transplant itself. And yeah, after that, just relax for the rest of the day, you know? I mean, just take it easy.
What could happen?
You know, speak to family, let them know, hey, I done it. You know, send people like selfies, like, look, here's me having my transplant, all that sort of stuff. And then, okay, the days are going by and loads of blood tests, daily blood tests, to just see how your body is responding. And my body was responding fine. You know, everything was going along as it should do. And then I think, you know, towards the end of March, one evening in hospital, I just became so ill. Like, out of nowhere. Like, I think it caught everybody by surprise.
Yeah. There's a period when someone has a stem cell transplant that they go through something called GVHD, which I think you should know, graft versus host disease. And that's when the donor cells start to fight against your own cells to take control, to get rid of any cancer cells that might be lingering. And generally it does a great job, but it can also actually become quite challenging. Is that part of what you was going through at that time, or did that come later?
So yes, so like part of it was GVHD associated,
right? And
I just like, you know, had an extreme like complication as a result of that, as well as, you know, other sort of GVHD related issues, say like to do with your skin,
yes,
to do with even, well, in my instance, funnily enough, like eyesight, you know. What else again?
Did it affect your tummy?
I think, yes, I was going to say again, like, you know, I had stomach issues as well.
Yeah.
And those go on for quite a while.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's not
it's
sort
not
of
a straight fix.
Yeah, you know, like, and you get it at different severities, and you have to take different forms of treatment.
It's part of the journey.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
So you got past all of that, and you're here with us today. I can't remember when it was that we actually, when I first met you, we was at a composers concert.
Yes.
We were raising funds, and you was there with us, and that was the first time that I actually met you.
Yes.
And you were very cautious at that event, in that actually you took a bit of a chance, now I think about it, because that was post-COVID.
Yeah, so
that was post-COVID,
March
after you'd had your transplant. We was in this massive room which was packed to the rafters of composer fans with them on stage, and we were collecting funds. We had no masks.
I had mine on though.
Oh, you had yours on.
I knew.
Yeah, that was our first meeting. So where are you now? How is your journey going?
My journey's going well now. Like,
good.
It's interesting how us even having this conversation, us meeting up today, is almost like a walk down memory lane for me, because
I hope it's a positive one.
Yeah, it is. You know, it's always good to be able to look back at where you've come from and look at where you're going to, and even where you're at now, right? And so for me, I'm doing well now. Like, that person, or not, you know, a few years back, I'm like, what, was that really me? So yeah, I'm living my life. I'm feeling good. I don't feel like I live in hospital anymore.
Great.
Because in 2021, I lived in the hospital, and even part of 2022 also. And so, yeah, now for me, it's about being able to use my experiences to encourage others to carry on the work of
Yes.
being a lifesaver.
Yes.
You know, like if there's a way in which I can contribute to the conversation, it's by sharing my experience and being like, hey guys, this is what it looks like when you decide to be a lifesaver. You know,
What does it mean to you, the bone marrow register, stem cell register? How important is it for you, and what would you like to say to people about joining the stem cell register to save a life?
it's extremely important for me in the sense that I'm actually a living beneficiary of what happens when somebody signs up and actually goes through with the process. And I feel like, why is everyone not on it? You know, obviously there's reasons and there's layers and all that sort of stuff, but in the simplest form, why is everyone not on the register to be a potential lifesaver?
If your donor was here now, if I can put you there, what would you say?
First and foremost, thank you. I think I would almost be in awe of my donor if they were here right now. Like, imagine being face to face with the person who actually gave
Saved
you
your
a
life.
second chance
Yeah.
at life. I don't even think there's enough words
No.
to even be able to describe your gratitude or, you know, to express your thanks. We'd probably also take a few selfies.
Yes,
I'm
of
a fan
course.
of pictures and capturing memories. That's one thing I did when I was in hospital. I captured all the memories that I could.
That's great.
You know, so, and yeah, I would love to find out so much more about his life.
Yes.
You know, like, tell me everything about yourself.
And why did you step forward?
Yeah, you know, because he did, like, when you sign up, yes, even if you do get that call, you're not under any sort of obligation to go through with it. You know, it's your free choice. And he decided, amongst everything that was going on in the world at that time, like I said, with COVID, so even like logistically, what it would have entailed for him to like go to the hospital, do his pre-checks, go through the actual donation process, you know, he still decided to do that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It
That's
is.
absolutely amazing.
It is.
So yeah. Like,
And so wherever you are, thank you.
yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being so candid.
It's a privilege to be sitting next to a lifesaver today. I know that, Helena, you've actually gone through the process of being a stem cell donor, which is amazing.
Thank you.
Yes, well
Would love to hear more about it.
I'm Helena, I'm 20, I'm about to be 21. And in January 21, my dad got diagnosed with leukemia, acute myeloid leukemia. And that following summer in June, I donated stem cells for him. And honestly, it was a no-brainer. Yeah.
Helena, so when Dad was diagnosed, did you know anything about blood cancers, or had you heard the term leukemia before?
I had heard the term before because I think that unlike other diseases, cancer is such like an equalizer, and it is so like, it's one of the most known about diseases. So leukemia was something that I had awareness of. But blood cancers, blood diseases even, the different types of leukemia, that was not something I was educated on at all until that point, until hearing that that was the specific type of cancer that my dad had actually.
Okay.
So donation, stem cells, all of this was really, really new to me at that time.
Okay. So when Mum and Dad told you the diagnosis, how did that impact you?
It was a very surreal experience because although I am quite like a very emotional person, I would think of myself, I remember feeling really, really like detached during the time, just sort of thinking like, okay, when is it gonna hit that like this is the diagnosis and this is like our lives now as a family? It just was a really surreal experience for me.
It was, okay. And so Dad started his treatment, and we must say that your family, as a family, you were living in Zurich at the time.
Yes, we were.
And so Dad started his treatments, and how was that for you, seeing Dad going through his treatments?
Again, it was surreal. It was a very strange time because my best friend also at the time had been diagnosed with lymphoma.
Right.
So she was also going through her chemo. So it was a really weird experience of like having my best friend and my dad. Those are such like different connections. Like my best friend is telling me all the things she's going through, and my dad being like a different figure to me. Like he's a parental figure. So like actually it was really special that I could have empathy for him in a way that I wouldn't have understood necessarily. My dad is very like dutiful. He's very like strong. He cares a lot about looking after those around him. So the things that I learned from my friend about chemo and the insights that I could then bring to how I was caring for my dad was really powerful for me at the time.
Great.
Yeah.
And did you go into denial at all, or was you dealing with it, you think, in the best way when you look back now?
I think dealing with it as best as I could.
Right.
Like, yeah, as we were just talking about, like the bodies are in a very delicate balance. And I
Yeah.
do think the not being my usual, like super emotional self during that time was actually what was best for me, because I was supporting those two people. Like, I think that I was doing the best that I could. And I know that looking back, like, I do think, wow, like, how was I just functioning? How was I functioning? How was my dad? How was my mum and my sister just
Yeah.
still carrying on every day, even though that was going on? Like, I was still going to school. I did my IB exams. My dad was doing chemo when I told him what uni I got into. So like, yeah, that was a very like, the fact that we even got through it is just really crazy to me.
Yeah. Well, I guess as a family, right?
Yeah.
When you're close, because I know you
Yeah.
guys are very close, you pull together, right? And
yeah.
you know that with your family, you pull together in order to get through this time. And I'm sure I know certainly my concerns when Daniel was going through his treatment is in those quiet moments when you're by yourself at night. I always wondered, what was he feeling? How was he managing to get through? And did you have those moments at all when you were by yourself? Yeah.
Definitely. Like just thinking like, what is my dad going through? Because he's not at home right now.
Yeah.
And there was like two sides to it, because also this was obviously not at the peak of the pandemic, but still at like quite a critical time. So like visits were not necessarily, it was not all of us going to visit all at the same time.
Yeah.
Like he could only have like sort of one regular visitor. My mom would go a lot of the time. I would be able to go some of the time. I don't remember if it was ever all three of us in the room. I think maybe like a couple of times. It was not that many times because of the concerns with the pandemic.
And the restrictions.
And
yeah.
the restrictions,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So, yeah, I did have times when I was just thinking, like, what is it like to deal with it? And again, having my friend being able to tell me was insightful, but it's a blessing, obviously, that, I mean, every type of chemo, there is no one type of chemo that's easy to deal with. However, her having lymphoma, it was a type that is less, has a much higher survival rate, especially when
Less
you're that
aggressive,
young.
do you mean?
It's less aggressive, that's
Yeah.
what I mean,
Yeah.
than leukemia. So
Yeah.
that was one thing. I never like feel like, I'm not sure if I ever could like understand what my dad was going through,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, it's just such a complex thing to really understand.
It is. I think to really understand, you have to be in it, because I think if you've not experienced it, it's very difficult for people to really understand. I mean, I had so many times when people would say to us about Daniel, well, he looks fine, what's the problem? But you know, obviously there's a massive problem, and if you're not with it 24 hours, 7 days a week, then it's difficult to define. So Dad was told he needed a stem cell transplant to cure the leukemia. At what point was you told that you could be tested, and how did that go?
It was an immediate thing, because like after getting the diagnosis, I mean, my dad getting the diagnosis, obviously they say not to Google. I did Google. I was like, what are the things that you can do to solve this? I knew of chemo because, like I said, cancer is a word that everyone knows, and they know of chemo, and I think that's honestly where the knowledge stops for the majority of people. So I'd heard about stem cells, and it sort of sounded like this mystical thing to me. I was like, those cells that you have as a baby, like that's the thing. I was like, okay, that doesn't even sound like a real thing to do. Obviously, like the testing process had gone through with my dad, with, you know, other members of our family, like his siblings, for example, and just due to logistics, honestly, like me being in the country, I was an option. And I remember my parents really stressing, like, you know, you don't have to do it. It's quite dangerous. And I was like, it's my dad. Like, it's a
Yeah.
no-brainer. Like, what am
Yeah.
I here for? Like,
Yeah.
so going through with the testing process was, it was actually quite straightforward. It was just a sense of, it felt like getting a normal blood test. But yeah, I filled out forms. It just didn't feel like as grave a process as, I guess, from the point when I first encountered stem cell transplants, that I thought it might be, and also that my family around me were like worried that it could be. Almost, I don't think that I was, like, I did have a lot of really great discussions with the GPs in Switzerland who informed me of like risks and things like that, and I did my research and I talked to my family, but even then, like, I guess you just go through it, like you go through the motions, you do those things with your family. So like, I wasn't really thinking about, in the sense that somebody who would be receiving the transplant would be thinking about the complications that could happen. I wasn't thinking about the complications even of my dad receiving it or of me giving it.
Right. And what did you donate stem cells from the blood, or did you donate bone marrow from the hip?
From the blood.
You did it from the blood?
Yes.
So 4 or 5 days prior to the actual donation, you were given a course of GCSF injections, which are, I can't remember the full name, but it's to stimulate the stem cells in your blood, so that come the 5th day, you donated about 5% of the stem cells that are in your blood. That was given to your father, and that 5% that you donated naturally replenished back, and so you didn't lose anything. So how did it feel, and can you just kind of take us through that process?
So I mean, like, just like Karen, I vlogged it. I vlogged a lot of it every day on the Snap stories. Like, guys, here's my little injection, you know, alcohol wipe my belly, stab it. My mum was like, I could never do that to myself. Like, she does not like the needles. My sister does not like the needles. I was like, light work, no reaction, whatever. So I did those, and I guess the only symptom that I did have that was noticeable, which I think is really common for when you do those stem cell mobilizers, is like the slight joint pain. Yes. It was not obvious. It was honestly not painful, but my joints just felt like achy and creaky.
Yes. How long did that last for?
Literally, it stopped pretty soon after the transplant. It can't have been longer than 2 weeks, maybe like 1.5 weeks.
Right.
But even that was not like detrimental to my everyday life. It was just like an odd feeling. I was aware of it. I was aware of myself. But it wasn't painful. I got used to doing the injections. Actually, I think that the worst thing that I had to do to prepare for it was the drinking water. I have really small veins. Every time I would go to the GPs, they would complain about how like awful and skinny my veins are when trying to take blood.
So you're drinking the water to hydrate yourself so that the veins can get nice and plump.
Yes, they had me drinking 3 liters a day, 3+ liters for the 2 days before and the day of the transplant. So I had my transplant at like 9 a.m. and I woke up at 7 and I was like throwing back 1.5 litre bottles.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And what did you do whilst you were actually donating, whilst you was on the machine donating the stem cells? What did you do? Did you go to sleep? Did you read a book? Did you watch a film?
I was on Netflix.
You was
I was
on
watching,
there you go.
I can't remember the name of the show. It got cancelled after a season, obviously, like everything on Netflix. But it was a good show. I watched the whole thing.
Great.
It was like 3 hours, I think.
And at the end, the 3 hours, what did they do?
I got a high five.
Yes.
I got a high
Bit
five.
Of plaster.
Yeah, I got a plaster. And I got to look at the bag, and I just remember being like, oh my gosh, those are my stem cells. Those are going to my dad. And also they're clear, which I didn't expect, because, you know, the blood comes out and it's a machine that separates your blood from the stem cells, and then you get the stem cells in a separate bag.
So it's a fluid.
Yeah.
And this is what people need to understand. We are donating a fluid to save another person's life. It's incredible, because I think people have all sorts of views in their minds about what are stem cells. You know, is it bits of bone? Are they going to drill into my, what do they say, into my spine, into my hand, into my knee? No, 90% of people that donate actually, it's just a fluid from the arm that replenishes itself. But actually, you're potentially saving a life. And you, of course, saved your dad's life.
Yeah, it feels kind of weird to say.
Yeah.
Also, I feel
your
like
dad gave birth to you, and then you gave your dad rebirth.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
But it feels so odd to say, because like looking at, I mean, there's even like, I guess, like an odd feeling around the word survivor, because of just like what it means for the process. It's like, is it surviving, or was it just sort of living every day and doing what you can and having the support of those around you and finding the strength in yourself? Like, it's like, did I give life to, I feel like I just did what was necessary, but like, I almost don't want praise for it. It's just like, I just did what I had to do, but like, I get it was important, so yeah.
It's absolutely major what
Yeah.
you did, because from our understanding, there were no other matches on the world register for your dad. And so if you had not done that act for your father, we may be having a different conversation.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. I
It-
mean, it was
it is.
only a couple, 2.5 years ago now, but it feels like it was really long ago.
Yeah. So I just want to take you back pre this. So myself and Orin had the pleasure of meeting your mum and your dad on the 29th of June 2007 at Citibank. ACLT was hosting a registration drive there, and your dad and your mum both joined the register. Your parents wanted to help other people who needed a stem cell transplant. And just, I don't know, I can't do the maths because my head's all clogged at the moment. 15, 16 years later, your father needed a match. And you were there to save his life. So what does it mean to you for people to consider joining the stem cell register and being on standby to help either a loved one, or actually in Karen's experience, having an unrelated donor?
It means the world to me, because especially now that I've gone through the process and I understand it was so unintrusive, so simple, so short. And when you go through the donation process and you have those doctors and nurses around you, you just get the sense of how important it is, and almost how uncommon it is maybe for them to get donors. Like it was like a special event almost. So for me to see that it was so simple and yet so unheard of, it just became like such an important thing for me, that everyone should be on these lists. Like, it's not something which has been any detriment to me. I am lucky enough to not have any severe health issues. I'm a little bit anemic, which girl isn't, I guess. I was lucky enough that it was not something that would affect me severely in the ways that it may affect others. But it was so simple and it was so impactful. Like,
this
those
is what we
two
need
things
people
is
to
what,
understand, right? We need people to understand how simple it is. You know, Daniel received his transplant on June the 16th, 1999 from a African-American donor, as I said earlier. And he was the first black person in this country to receive an unrelated stem cell donor. So we've come a long way since then, because ACLT has found numerous stem cell donors, not just for black patients, for patients of all ethnicities, but we are still nowhere near close enough, because a lot of people are still not finding donors. And so can I just ask you, what would you like to say to people that are watching in regards to, if they've not registered, what could we say to try and encourage them to sign up?
I would say the first thing that I would direct, especially to the Black community, is I want to extend understanding that there is a lot of trauma and pain associated with, like, going to the doctors, being in hospital, getting surgery within our community, and it's understandable where that comes from. But I found it so empowering to educate myself and empower myself on what I can do for those who look like me and are in similar situations to my dad. What I can do in just such a simple and unintrusive way. What I can learn myself from, unbiased sources about how this works. What is it to take the stem cells from me? What is it? How does my body regenerate it? What are the possible things I could deal with afterwards? What are the support systems available for me? This is all information that we can empower ourselves with, and I would encourage people to go out and do their learning on the ACLT website, on the NHS website. information is all readily available
Yeah.
from people who look like us, and to just anybody of any community who is not on the register yet, I would say that I always want to stray away from those things of like, it could be anyone, because it could be anyone, but then also it couldn't.
Yeah.
Maybe if it hadn't been my dad, I wouldn't have thought about this.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, if it wasn't your dad, do you think you would have done this?
The thing is, I was already very conscious of blood diseases and of just how it affects Black people and people of colour in the UK because of my sister. Can you tell us why?
Can you tell us about your sister?
So my sister, my bestie, she's 5 years older than me, and she has sickle cell anemia.
Okay.
That's something that she's had all her life. I'm not even a carrier for sickle cell, whereas my sister actually does have sickle cell.
Yeah.
So seeing that affect me, and saying affect me also feels like stretching it, because when these things are part of your life, it's just the norm.
Yeah.
Like having my sister's what needs that she needed at school, for example, or knowing that she would be having a crisis. When I was younger, I didn't even really understand what sickle cell was. I just know like my sister gets sick every now and then, and it's serious, and we just sort of wait it out. And she's in a lot of pain when it does happen.
Yeah.
And what fixes it is having blood and recovery time and a lot of love and a lot of care. Knowing those things made me have a really strong tendency to encourage people to donate blood. However, actually having the support system of the ACLT would not have made me know that it's so, that there's such a system and such a community of people who want to encourage, want to support once you've done it, want to remind you. I guess if I hadn't known those things, I also wouldn't have wanted to donate blood myself, maybe even. Yeah. Despite knowing and despite having it that close to home.
I mean, I've got to say, prior to ACLT, myself and Oren, we were not on the stem cell register. We can remember the Anthony Nolan story, which was way before your time in the 1970s, when he was diagnosed as needing a bone marrow transplant. There was nothing set up around the world, and it was reported on the news, and we watched it as youngsters. Never occurred to me to ever join the stem cell register or even to donate blood until we got Daniel's diagnosis. Immediately joined the stem cell register, but I can remember one day walking past a blood donation centre in central London and thinking, I need to walk in here and donate some blood. Daniel is receiving blood. And that was my first journey into blood donation. And so sometimes these illnesses hit us, and suddenly it opens up a world of knowledge of things that we should be doing, or maybe we should be educating ourselves in doing. Do you think that you would be with ACLT if you did not receive your own diagnosis?
I think I would.
Okay.
Reason being is that I recall vividly, having heard about ACLT when I was younger, having seen, parts of your journey that were reported on the news at the time, and it always stuck with me, right? But I think, as with most people, you say, oh, you'll do it. Okay, I didn't get to do it today. I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, tomorrow's come and gone, next month, next week, etc. However, fast forward to when, yes, I did get my diagnosis, but then I guess also fast forward to when life just slowed down a bit because of the pandemic and everyone, having, I guess, a bit more time. That's when I really actively decided to, get in touch with the ACLT, find out more about what the ACLT is doing. And
I know you had a great relationship with one of the ladies in our office during COVID, when you reached out, and she stayed in touch with you throughout your journey prior to your transplant and after. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How did her assistance to you help you?
I think it was just that human touch. As humans, we need relations, we need interactions with one another, right? And I think I was particularly touched by how she honored her word. I remember when she first got in touch with me, it was under, I guess you could say, interesting circumstances, in that I was quite ill at the time in hospital and all the rest of it. And she said she would phone me back in a week to just check on me. And, you know, somebody says that to you, say, okay, all right then. But then literally a week later, she actually called me to check up on me. And I was so touched by that. It was so nice. And then from there, you know, she would call me regularly, email me, find out how I'm doing. And then as I started to be able to get better and start to, you know, be able to go out more, you know, I started getting a bit more involved with ACLT and coming to the events that I could come to. And even going back to your point of like, you know, say like donating and giving blood, etc. At this point, I thought, okay, yeah, great. I'm going to be able to give blood now. But obviously, I then soon found out that once you've received blood, and
you can't
unfortunately,
receive.
you can't, which was a bitter
yeah.
pill to swallow. But then I said, okay, I can't contribute in that way, but I can contribute with my story and with my experiences. And thankfully, because of the work you're all doing, I've been able to do that. So, yeah, and I look forward to doing more of that. And it's just great to know that, you know, there's organizations such as ACLT and the many others who are out there engaging with the community, because that's where it starts from, engagement with the community. I know you mentioned you met Helena's dad and mom at a drive, you know, all the way back in 2007.
Yeah.
And then look, fast forward to 2021. So it's so important that we're all able to do our part, I feel, like in whatever way, you know, to be able to contribute to the cause and, you know, be there for one another, you know.
And be part of that community, because like it really is a community. It's like, it's not just a charity, and it doesn't start and end at you just being sort of a number in the system. Like these are people who have made connections with forever. Like
Literally.
Of course, Bev was literally at my like family home and stuff, staying with my parents and in my home, having a great time, and all those things are just so special to me.
I'd just like to say to both of you, you're both amazing people, but on top of your own experiences, you're also ACLT volunteers, sometimes called ambassadors for us. And Karen, my first meeting with you was at the Composers event, which was amazing, off the chart. But also you actually attended the Townley Grammar School to register donors. And I believe you addressed the students. And at that event, 150 students actually signed up because of your words. So can you just tell our audience what your experience is as an ambassador or volunteer for ACLT and why others should consider doing it?
So I've had, like, I guess you could say, two types of experiences when it comes to volunteering with the ACLT. So I remember that Composers event, because it was my first time volunteering with yourselves. And in my head, I sort of had a vision as to what it was going to be like. I thought, okay, like, yeah, we're going to be set up in a table somewhere, and people are going to come to us, and we're going to sign them up, we're going to tell them about it. And then I get to the event, and it wasn't like that. Because understandably so, it was a live music event. So it was a case of us, like, we had like a little table at the back, but we really had to get in there amongst the crowd, shaking the buckets, or having a card reader, and trying to engage people. And obviously people are having fun, so it can be a bit hard to engage them. And then I remember at one point, Orion went onto the stage to talk to the audience, which I thought was amazing. I was like, wow. Because how do you like even like get people's attention?
And especially, you're at a music concert, people are here to hear their band. They don't want some fella talking about charity from the stage. Right?
They don't.
But he does it all the time.
I was so amazed. It was so good. And he just commanded that attention. He quite literally was like, okay, everybody, be quiet.
Yes.
And it worked.
That's right.
It worked. And, you know, he was able to address the crowd. And yes, you know, there were some people who were more receptive than others. But nonetheless, we still got that interaction. And even if it was just a seed that was sown. Then fast forward to when we went to Townley Grammar, where we're speaking to these students in a different setting, whereby they're all sitting down, they're listening to us. We had a presentation, we had banners, and, you know, we had the sign-up registration forms. And I got the opportunity to share my story with the students. And it was quite interesting to see how it actually resonated with them. I was like, this is what it looks like when you, at this age, make this decision to be a lifesaver. And it's as simple as that. And it was just really positive to see how so many took the forms, filled it in, and bless them. Some of them like actually got to phone their parents right there and then to be able to be like, hey, mom, dad, this is what I'm doing. It's okay.
Yeah.
And you know, that's quite interesting because even though from the age of 16, you can actually legally, you know, decide to do it yourself. But it was quite endearing to just see still at that age, you know, they just want the reassurance of their parents. And I guess, you know, when you're in school as well at that time, like, I think usually you don't really get to have your phones on you, but it was like, you know, the head teacher gave them the permission to be like, okay, go ahead. And so at the end of it, we had like quite a few bags full of registration forms, which was amazing. Like,
I think that was our most successful school, sixth form stem cell sign-ups of that year. And I think having you there, it always helps. It's really important who the messenger is when we give our talks, because if the students especially can get that feeling of what we're saying, then it always helps. And I think we've kind of got it to a fine art now. But you know, Orin, Sabrina, the team, yourself, we are the voices that people want to hear. They want to hear true life stories. And if it encourages them to do what we want them to do, then it's a win-win.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited now that you've mentioned having such a good experience at the sixth form to go to my own talk at a school. I'm going to Heron Hall Academy, is it?
Oh, nice.
Next week.
Next week.
Next week.
Now, aren't they?
School is back.
No, it'll be great. I'm sure it'll be really, really great.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely really excited for that because, like, I mean, being in secondary is still such like a close memory to me. And when I think about the people who came to talk to us in my school, in the schools that I've been to, I did not have a lot of people coming from charities. I didn't have a lot of people coming to talk about being involved with those sorts of things. So it feels all the more impactful to know that, okay, I can actually be part of that change, and having that kind of involvement in schools, empowering students to make their own decisions, even if they're young.
Can I just ask, so your first registration drive was at Lambeth Country Show?
Yes.
And I believe there was an incident there where you spoke to some young guys.
Oh my gosh.
Who were a bit nervous, and you explained to them your story. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, I mean, like, it was summer. Let me tell you, it was not how I thought my first drive was gonna go, because my hay fever was killing me. I don't know if you remember. I'd done my nasal spray, I'd done my eye drops, I'd taken my medicine. Event. Oh my goodness, Sabrina will remember. I was dying, so I was like, I don't know that I'm gonna be the best representative of, like, I did a stem cell transplant and I'm fine now. Like, I don't look very fine, but you know, we met this group of like young guys, and everyone was having fun. There's food, there's music, and they'd come over to the stall, but they were unsure. They were like, you know, I don't know really if like. You know, like, what exactly is a stem cell like, though? Like, that sounds scary. That sounds dangerous. And I was like, well, I did it. And each of them, one of them was like a foot taller than me. And I was like, well, I did it. It wasn't that hard. It was like, oh, I definitely need to sign up. If somebody who's so different to me can do it, if somebody who's, I don't know, maybe sneezing and like, if somebody's struggling can do it.
When people hear real life stories,
it's true.
Because you've done
it
makes the difference.
And it's difficult because you don't want to also, I guess, tokenize stories as just like a means of getting people to sign up. But it is real. It is our story. It's your story. It is my life. And like, yes, that is something my dad went through, and it's something that's normal to me, but something that could inspire someone else. And telling them that like did make them want to do, you know, the quick swab.
I think a lot of what we do, it's based around trust, right? Would you say? And I think the public trust us with their information so that they can go on and do what we're asking them to do to save lives. Would you agree with that? It's about trust, about the messenger.
Because like I was saying, having it come from being at an event like that, also I know that ACLT was at Black Pride, ACLT is at a lot of events which are community centered and all about bringing people together. And you know, making it known that donation is all part of bringing people together, and all just as special as the celebration of like different communities and bringing, you know, boroughs or bringing communities together. It's just as similar as it is to donating blood.
How was it signing people up at Lambeth Country Show?
I mean, honestly, it was similar to what you were saying. Flagging people down, I do think of myself as quite extroverted, but it's putting yourself out there in a completely different way to try and signal people down. And you know it's such an important cause, but also that just like I was, say, before my dad was diagnosed, it's not something that they necessarily have awareness of. So you do have to think of creative ways to engage those people.
That's right.
You do have to be creative. You do have to be loud.
Yes.
You have to talk directly to people. You can't let I guess, like the bystander effect happen. Like just talk openly. It's like, no, you in the shirt. I feel like you need to see this. You need a flyer.
Yeah. I think a lot of the ambassadors have different ways of trying to engage, right? It's not easy. And I think actually since COVID, it's actually become slightly harder. But I'm hoping that we are kind of turning that point over. Definitely. And people are more engaging more now and wanting to do something. Our numbers of registration have started to climb up again, so
that's great.
I think we're definitely there.
Well, why would people be hesitant to sign up?
I mean, I guess like you were mentioning with the concert, when you're stopping people at Carney at an event, at a party, it's like, I'm not here to think about charity, I'm not here to think about what they might class as a sob story. It's like, that's not what this day is about. Or maybe they already have misconceptions, like we were discussing about the stem cell donation. It's intrusive. About the blood donation, it's like, well, what if I have a health issue? What if I have this and that? Actually, I would love to share a story of when I tried to do my first blood donation this summer.
What, for transfusion?
Yeah.
For someone
So I wanted to do my first blood donation, and that was completely inspired by being on the text list for ACLT. I can't remember the name of the person, but you'd shared someone who had done like that. They had done an inconceivable amount of donations. Like it was in the tens, or maybe they'd just done their 100th. And I was like, oh my goodness, this person has done such an insane amount of donations. I need to get on my Zoom so I can be like them right there when I get to that point in my life. So I'd signed myself up, I'd gone down, enlisted one of my friends for moral support, filled out more forms, picked up a cookie, picked up a drink. And once I actually got into the room, I hadn't mentioned that I was anemic and that might be a concern. They did a finger prick test on me also to check that, you know, my iron levels weren't too low, they were clear, that was all good. And I had a bit of a sniffle, it was the hay fever again. And actually I ended up, because they are so like, like vigilant and detail oriented about these things. They were like, even though you just have hay fever, we don't want you to have, and you're anemic, we don't want you to have, lightheadedness and severe dizziness after doing this. We don't want you to have a bad reaction, so come back another time. And honestly, like that care was actually a huge green flag to me, and it only motivated me more to like rebook my appointment. And
did you rebook?
I have rebooked. I had to rebook it because I was abroad at the time. And also I just started another medication, so I wasn't sure if I could donate. But I have rebooked.
Right.
And actually that was again due to the consistency which you mentioned of the people at that clinic, because they'd called me back. I think they called me 3 times. They're like, hello, like they sent me emails, but they called me, and the human touch was what did it. They're like, hi, how are you? We're calling from the donation. I was like, oh my gosh, I know what you're calling about, because I've been on the behind side of this with the ACLT, and I know how important it is to follow up. And I just wanted to, I was like, I have to say thank you so much for following up, and I will do it, and it is because you called me.
Brilliant. I'd like to say thank you, Helena, and thank you, Karen, for joining us today.
On behalf of both myself and Karen, thank you so much for having us today. If you've been inspired by our stories, please consider joining the Stem Cell Register today.
If you're 16 and over, you can register to be a stem cell donor by visiting aclt.org.
Thanks very much for watching and listening.